I am Raisa Serafica from MOVEPH. I'm heading MOVEPH, so just for everyone's reference, we're actually doing this fact-checking webinar on a very regular basis. Normally, we start with like the online landscape, then we talk about our fact-checking methodology because I'm sure some of you would know that Rappler is a fact-checking partner of Rappler. And then we usually end with an exercise to, but for this one, this is a special webinar because we invited a very special guest. So we'll be specifically talking about yung challenges in fact-checking historical claims, right? So, and I'm sure that's also the reason why we got a lot of attendees today kasi sobrang interesting nun. How will you fact-check claims from the past, right? Okay, so without further ado, I'll be ending our poll already, and then we'll be starting officially. Okay. Jen, can we see our next slide? Ay, ang fun. May mga magkakakilala sa chat. Ayan. Nag-hi-hi na sila to Jen. Because they see somebody who's also,
networking opportunity din ito.
Yes. So, just a tip. If you go to the chat, you can address your message to all panelists and attendees para rin makilala nyo yung mga ibang attendees natin. Alright, nasa na ang ating screen share, Jen, for our house rules. So I mentioned na since we have a big audience, we'll be just sharing.
May kadorm ka daw, Raisa.
May kadorm. Hi! Mention conscious tuloy ako na may kakilala ko. Okay. Sampa. You're from Sampa, I'm sure. Okay, quick house rules. So if meron ng mga nag-raise hands.
Ay, dyan, nag-ano ka?
So if you can use that feature if you have questions. Or if you, later, pag may activity, usually we also queue that. So you can raise your hand if you have questions or concerns. Like I meant, lagi kong kinu-queue yung chat. So if you have questions or may comment kayo about the ongoing discussion, you can use the chat room. Normally, from our experience, every time we do a webinar, laging active din yung chat room. Like, mayroong sariling discussion na nagagamit doon. So we encourage that kind of activity as well. So if meron lang kayong comments, go kada kayo sa chat room and we'll be entertaining. We'll be there as well. As you can see, maraming panelists from Rappler. So meron kayong magiging kausap dyan. Stay muted when not speaking. And then, if after this one, we'll be emailing you then for a quick survey. We hope you can fill that up because we want to help. That will help us further develop our future webinars. And because we have a lot of audience, right now it's 180, we hope, we want to foster a learning environment for everyone. So please make sure to avoid being rude, right? So please respect everyone's opinion. And we will not be tolerating rude behavior. We'll be ejecting as soon as we see this rude behavior on the chat. Okay. And then, again, ipapaalala ko, especially sa mga kararating lang, we will be having a selfie towards the end of this webinar, usually around 1 hour and 30 minutes itong webinar na to. So if you want to join that, para may ma-post kayo later sa Facebook niyo or sa Twitter or sa Instagram niyo, just make sure that your webcam ready because we'll be granting video capacity for everyone later. Okay. I'll stop talking and I'll be throwing the platform to Vern para ma-introduce na yung mga iba. Okay, thank you.
All right. Hi guys, I'm Vern. I'm a researcher writer at Rappler. Usually my job day to day is fact checking, and we've decided to invite Sir Xiao today. So if you guys are not familiar with Professor Xiao Chua, he's a professor at the Salle University. He was also the creator of Xiao Time, the TV segment on PTV4. We've invited him over because tomorrow is Independence Day and we thought it would be a really good opportunity to talk about Philippine history, especially because as fact checkers, we've seen a lot of claims circulating online about stories about the past. and they don't necessarily match up with what we read in our textbooks. And it's particularly hard for us to fact check those kinds of things, especially when it seems like they've sort of grown a community and kind of they've taken minds of their own, these sort of, I guess you could call them legends about our own history, right? Yeah. And I think Ma'am Gemma is our head of research, and she's seen all of these groups and sometimes even Facebook pages about supposed hidden histories as well. So we're just here to have a conversation about these things and how to fact check these things. Yeah.
And I guess, Vernice, we're also here to like look at the challenges to fact checking these things to begin with. Like, are all of them fact checkable to begin with? Or ano to, may limitations ba yung pag-fact check ng mga ganitong ng mga ganitong things? So with us today is somebody who does not need an introduction, but we're really glad that he's with us right now. I watched his shows before, yung sa yung Xiao Time, and he's a professor of history at De La Salle University. So welcome po Professor Xiao Chua. And we're really glad that you're here with us to discuss this medyo timely lang po kasi naisip namin since Independence Day, magandang pag-usapan ang history, di ba? And actually yun yung isang di ba? Yung isang bagay na di ba, history natin, isa sa mga pinag-uusapan na disputes is Independence Day. So may masasabi po ba kayo doon?
Well, first of all, historic day to everyone. Ang ganda ba yung English ko? Diyos, makasaysayang araw po sa ating lahat.
Oy, pwedeng Taglish, di ba?
Of course. Gemma, ganito. Independence Day, we know that in itself is contested because, again, we know all the facts about it. Well, of course, not all the facts kasi did Aguinaldo, again, the trivialities of it, diba? Did Aguinaldo hold the flag? Yeah. That is now a debate kasi supposedly Ambrosio Rianzares Bautista read the proclamation and also held the flag. So on June 12 of 1898. So yan, napaka-trivial niyan, sa totoo lang pinag-aawayan ngayon, But the most, of course, yung pinakamatinding conflict dyan ay yan ba talagang Independence Day natin? Because we all know that on July 4, 1946, that is when we really became a state. Diba? That's when we became an independent nation, when we were granted by America independence. But again, how do I resolve that? Simple lang, you just have to look at the intention of why we celebrate June 12. Well, we celebrate June 12, and the Philippine Historical Association, my organization, has something to do with it. When Professor Gabriel Fabella actually pushed that we should have a more pro-Filipino Independence Day in the Filipino perspective. And remember that in the June 12, 1898 proclamation, it was we who won the revolution against the Spaniards after 333 years. So ibig sabihin, tayo yung nagsabing malaya na tayo. And we were winning. The Americans were there only in Manila Bay. They did not really help us on ground. So we were winning against the Spaniards. It was our victory. Yun yung kagandahan nung June 12. Whereas like July 4, yes. Whereas July 4, Gemma, ito nakalagay sa sinabi ni Truman sa proclamation niya that it was recognizing Philippine independence. What does that mean when you recognize? They did not
parang iko, okay ka na.
We were already independent. They took that away and now they're recognizing it by returning it to us. That was Aguinaldo's perspective na siya nauli lang naman nila sa atin yung kalayaan na ibinigay nila. So for me, I take that as as an explanation. And again, you have to realize that tawag dito, opinion yan Yun yung problema, opinion yan. The facts are there, but there would always be a differing opinion. Now, someone asked who verified it. Philippine Congress verified it because it is now a law. So June 12. Pero most historical claims, sometimes the NHCP will verify it, but sometimes they will not verify it. So, minsan, historians will have some sense of agreement about it, Gemma.
And minsan walang consensus.
Yes. How do you guys go about validating a fact in history if it happened in the past and like everyone is dead?
Yeah. Very good. I'll tell you something. Very basic to, and I'll make it fast because this is like one term, one semester of historiography. Simple lang, Okay. We historians look at first the evidence. Kasi history or kasaysayan, isa itong discipline that is based on evidence. So, titignan muna natin, ano ba yung source o batis? And we classify sources two ways. One, is it written or non-written? And then the other one, more important, is it primary or a secondary source? So, pag primary, you have to look at the source. Titignan mo, itong document, itong tula, itong artifact. Did it come from that time? So, if we're talking about Rizal, who is dead already, did he leave any writings? Did his friend nakakita sa kanya left something? Na we can go. Kasi remember that history can only be accessed through one public memory, which is sometimes important, but medyo sabihin na natin na minsan kung strictly historical, medyo mahirap. And of course, history, no? Which is the documentation, documents kung may naiwan. A secondary source was written by someone who read the primary sources, who was not there, was not from that time, but he or she, they compare these sources. So may triangulation of sources na tinatawag tayo. So that's how we go about. Even if they're dead, titignan mo kung primary ba yan o secondary. And then the next layer would be criticizing the source itself. So for example, did Rizal write sa aking mga kabata? What are the evidences na titignan mo dyan? Yan ba ay meron ba siyang handwritten na version? Wala. May mga words na hindi nagtali kasi gumamit siya ng salitang kalayaan nung 8 years old daw siya pero hindi pala niya, sabi niya hindi niya alam nung 26 siya. Sumulat siya sa Kuya Pasiano niya nung 25 siya na hindi niya alam kung ano yung salitang kalayaan. Ginamit daw niya doon sa aking mga kabata. So we now know that
when that happens, when that happens, parang pwedeng maging in dispute yung yung isang
ang tawag doon, hindi siya pumasa doon sa tinatawag nating yung external criticism. So yung source mismo ang faulty. So ibig sabihin hindi si Rizal lang gumawa noon. Okay. Ang susunod na layer ay yung titignan mo siya internally, internal criticism. So ano yung internal criticism? Simple lang. Titignan mo kahit totoo yung kunwari, totoong sinulat ni Rizal to, handwriting niya to, yung papel nag-exist noon, this is really a good translation of Rizal's writing. So it's a primary source. Pumasa sa external, pero internally titignan mo, totoo kaya yung sinasabi ni Rizal dito? O totoo kaya yung sinasabi ni Pangulong Ramos dito? So mga ganon. So ibig sabihin, pagka external criticism, tinitignan mo kung totoo ang dokumento. Pag internal, tinitignan mo kung nagsasabi ba ng totoo ang dokumento. And you can learn this by looking at the credibility of the person and yung tinatawag natin na triangulation of sources.
So actually, taking off from there, nag-iiba ba? Has there been instances when nag-iiba yung view ng history? Like, nasulat na sa, naituro na sa atin, gaya ng sinasabi ni Vern. Or naisulat na sa mga libro, di ba? Mga textbooks. Tapos naging...
Right.
Oo, naging hindi totoo.
For example, kailangan makita natin na sometimes hindi lang facts eh. So, totoo yun. Minsan may na-invalidate na facts. Bakit? Dati, we know, very trivial ito, no? Pero dati, July 7, alam nating itinatagang katipunan because on July 6, Jose Rizal was arrested. So Rizal was arrested because of the La Liga Filipina. He was thrown to the pit and after a few days, the next day, Bonifacio founded the Katipunan. KKK. Okay. Now, some documents from Spain were found, and these were confiscated by the Guardia Civil Veterana. They're now in the what we call the Archivo General Militar de Madrid. And they found the constitution of the Katipunan, KKK, that the date was January of 1897. 1892. Sorry, July 6, 1892. January 1892. So, ibig sabihin, the founding of the Katipunan was not really a direct result of Rizal's banishment or arrest, but it was already planned even before Jose Rizal. So, yun yung makikita
tapos
natin.
Tapos ni-launch na lang.
Yes, ni-launch lang. That was the formal launching. Right. So, nag-iiba talaga. Okay. Pero, Gemma, wait lang pwede rin mag-iba yung perspective. Kasi for example, it was the foreigners who wrote our history kasi sila yung nakakapagsulat nung unang panahon. So we read those histories and ang nakita natin ay tinignan natin yung pananaw ng kasaysayan sa pananaw nila. So pag sinabi nila, ay bobo yung mga Pilipino noon, pinaniwalaan natin yun na bobo tayo. Pero ngayon, eventually, nag-iba na yung perspective kasi mas alam na natin yung Filipino perspective. Kaya nga may mga Filipino historians sa tinatawag nating mga nationalist historians kasi they have a different view of history, not necessarily invalidating the work of people who wrote history before, but only amplifying Filipino perspective.
Okay. So parang like instead na ang tinitingnan yung perspective, like yung pagtingin nung mga Americans na nandito tinitingnan din yung mga experiences ng ibang nung larger yung community ng Filipinos na nandito. Right. And so in effect, parang we're saying both are true, right? Both are true from a certain perspective.
Pag perspective, yes. Pag perspective ang problema.
Right?
Pag facts kasi, pwede kasing pag-agrihan yan up to a certain extent. No? So, pwedeng pareho kayo ng tinitignan na facts. O, kahit sa political leanings.
Okay.
No? We have the same set of facts about President Marcos, pero pwedeng yung perspective nung isa, mas matimbang yung negative, sa perspective nung kabila, mas matimbang yung positive. But you're looking at the same set of facts.
So dito papasok yung actually this is interesting kasi in social media marami yung 'di ba yung parang lumalabas na during the martial law maganda, I mean matahimik, mga ganun. So which is not necessarily kasi baka naman sa kanilang pananaw or yung experience nila ganun nga, tahimik nga.
Yun nga.
But it doesn't,
tama, Gemma, no?
You're saying
Gemma, ganito, tama ka, no? Kaya nga, mahirap talaga na magkumausap ng, not necessarily mahirap, pero mahirap talagang basagin, for example, yung idea ng isang tao na wala namang naranasang atrocity ng martial law at maganda yung kanyang buhay at maganda yung kanyang alaala. Mahihirapan ka na sabihin sa kanya na ito yung nangyari. Lalo na kung ang dating mo ay parang kino-correct mo siya. So, it's not just fact-checking that is important. Your approach also. This is what I learned as a historian doing martial law studies since I was high school. Na there was also a time na I was rabbit. Na parang pag sinabi mong magaling si Marcos, talagang babanatan talaga kita. Tatawagin kitang mangmang. Pero, there was a time na alam ko nag-backfire sa akin. And then apparently, what happened to me was, I found a middle ground approach wherein I will say that I respect your mother or your lolo's story, but also remember that different din yung biography which is your story when you put other biographies together. So what I do is I respect that. I listen to your opinion and I will not change what you think of Marcos, but also listen to what the other people had in their time with Marcos. And maybe we can talk decently about this. Of course, the problem in social media is that you cannot talk decently about things because everything is weaponized by both sides. Both sides. So, nagiging weapon yung history. Which is, of course, when you're a historian, you want to avoid doing. you want to avoid doing unless you really want to go to propaganda.
Okay. So you have you have perspectives, 'di ba? Pero meron din bang yung outright talagang hoaxes? Like yung talagang purposely being done. Like I mean, and why is that happening? Why is it being done?
Okay. I'll tell you something, this which is interesting. You know, there's a term called necessary fictions. I think Carol Howe wrote it.
Okay.
And people, there's a need there for something na gusto ng tao na magkaroon siya. So for example, when history was written in the 1900s, in the 1910s, the 1920s, parang people were looking at the gold. People want to go to a golden past. Kasi when they go to China, they read that the Chinese history, kasi baka si Vernice, no? I'm joking, of course. Pinoy tayo.
Pinoy na
Pinoy. Ako din Pinoy na Pinoy. Pero yan, may heritage of China, no? Na makikita mo na, they have a great civilization. So tayo, nag-aanap tayo ng great civilization. Nasa ng great civilization? And we look down on ourselves for having nothing. Only the Banawe rice terraces. Ganun yung sinasabi nila noon. So, people now, at that time, people were thinking na, let's have something to believe na sana may golden age tayo. Doon pumasok yung Kalanchaw Code. Diba? Because Kalanchaw Code, sabi ng Kalanchaw Code, no, we have a code like Hammurabi. We have a legal code. Parang meron tayong old writings si Clauche. No? Meron tayong mga, yung mga Assyrians, meron tayong mga gawa nila. Ganun din yung sa atin. So, that is where we see na, halimbawa, yan, yung Kalanchaw Code. Kung pwede lang, basahin ko yung, ito, for fun lang ito, kung pwede, let me read na meron daw tayong Kalanchaw Code bago dumating yung mga Kastila, no? Alam mo kung ano nakalagay doon? Ayon sa batas na to, kung ikaw ay nakapatay, nagnakaw o sinaktan ng mga matatanda, ikaw ay itatali sa isang bato at ibubulid sa ilog o kumukulong tubig. O kung malaki utang mo sa dato na hindi mo mabayaran, 3 beses na yung kamay ay ibubulid sa kumukulong tubig. Diba? Wala ring sino man ang bibigay sa labi sa tawag ng laman. Diyos ko, patay pala ako. I'm joking. O magkaroon ng mga asawang ubod ng bata. Dahil sa unang beses na gawin mo ito, ikaw ay palalanguin ng 3 oras at sa ikalawan naman ay hahampasin hanggang mamatay sa pamamagitan ng latigong may mga tinik. Kaya Vernice, huwag kang mag-aasawa ng matanda kasi baka palanguin ng 3 oras yung asawa mo, ano? Hindi rin dapat gambalain ng kapayapaan ng mga libingan dahil hahampasin ng latigong may tinik hanggang mamatay. Papatawan ng parusang bitay ang makapatay ng pating o buhaya na may stripes. So kung walang stripes yung napatay mo, pwedeng hindi ka parusahan. Ganun ba yun? Kamatayan din kung mamamana ka sa gabi, archer, sa mga matatandang babae o lalaki. So kung bata yung papanain mo, okay lang.
Babae na.
Exactly. Gagawin kang alipin kung may-ari ka ng aso na kumagat sa dato. Papaluin naman sa loob ng 2 araw ang mga umaawit habang naglalakbay sa gabi. So sa pag-araw, pwede. Ipakakagat ka naman sa langgam sa loob ng kalahating araw kung ikaw ay makapatay ng itim na pusa kapag new moon.
Papayag ba yung mga langgam dyan?
Puting pusa kapag full moon.
Okay lang.
Susunugin naman ng etsas kung saan sinasamba ang mga anito. Yan yung summary ng Kalanchaw Code. So,
pero bakit pinaniwalaan yan?
Ay, ang daming historians po ang naglagay sa mga libro nila.
Sa libro, di ba?
Yes.
Bakit?
You know why? Because we want to believe that we had a code such as this. That is in line with other codes. Pero alam mo, nakakatawa. Pag tinignan mo tong mga ito, parang sasabihin mo, ayoko tumira sa Pilipinas nung panahon ng ating mga ninuno, nuknukan sila ng mga di ba?
So, kapag ganun, when you find out that something's not true pala, anong gagawin sa mga history books natin?
And this is what happened here, di ba? And to answer your question, Vernice, no? Napaganda kasi meron ayos yung ating flow, yung ating program. Makikita mo na yung mga facts na to, ganito, di ba? Nailagay sa libro. Then one time, the historian, si Scotty, what's his name? Si William Henry Scott, Alam mo, nahanap daw niya kasi itong mga to, nahanap daw to sa National Library, binigay ng isang tao ng pangalan na Jose Marco. At ito ay nakasulat daw ito. Siguro nawala na yung records, pero nandyan pa yung writing. Ang dami niya palang binigay na hoax na mga documents. Meron siyang meron
siya yung
siyang
provenance nito.
Yes. Legends of the Islands of Negros, siya din ang gumawa. Yung La Loba Negra ni Padre Burgos, mukhang siya rin ang gumawa. Hindi naman tutong si Padre Burgos ang sumulat. So, dineposit niya ito lahat sa National Archives, sa National Library, nung panahon na before the war. So, naging fact siya. Pero tinignan, it doesn't make sense. Tapos, ito pala yung pinagmulan, sabi ni William Henry Scott, walang provenance. Tama ka, Gemma, that's the term. Walang provenance. We cannot prove na nagpasa-pasa ito from our ancestors to here because we did not see the evidence. And again, napatunayan na lahat halos ng nilagay ni Jose Marco na verify na lahat ay false. So, parang kaya lang, there's a need.
Go.
Sorry, there's a need for people to go back to a golden age. Yun yung problem. Ngayon, ang dami na nating experts sa anthropology, archaeology, na nagpapakita sa atin without making hoaxes na meron tayong kultura bago dumating ang mga Espanyol. Kaya maganda na ngayon yung ating and again, sorry, Gemma,
so parang
continue.
in effect, in a rush to parang in a rush to establish our history and yung ancestry, we jumped at that chance, ganon.
Yes.
Yun yung nangyari.
So for a need to explain things you cannot explain, you create a hoax. So necessary fiction siya for many people. Yan ang problema niya. So you cannot explain a certain wealth, you make a hoax out of it.
Necessary fiction lang ba siya? Or meron din bang parang possibility na it's really purposely done and then para to fool people? Or may pwede bang ganon? Is it possible na or the other side of it is kasi nagpo-proliferate ngayon yung mga hidden history. Meron nga bang parang efforts din na itago nga yung kasaysayan, 'di ba?
Siyempre meron talaga. Meron din talaga. Iba-ibang level po 'yan, sinasabi niyan may misinformation, 'di ba? May disinformation, yung mga ganyan. Pero pwedeng pasimplihin ko 'yan by saying na minsan nagkamali lang talaga, pero kumalat yung information. Nangyayari po sa akin 'yan. Meron mga times na hindi ko na-check na halimbawa, may naisulat ako recently na si Felipe Salvador at yung si Gabino ng Gabinista, yung inattendan niyang church ay magpinsan. Pero yun pala, theory lang pala yun ng isang historian. No? So,
hindi siya
ibang nag-check, hindi sila magkamag-anak. 'Di ba? Or hindi ma-prove na magkamag-anak sila. So, yun yung limitation. Hindi ma-prove na magkamag-anak sila. Paniniwala lang pala yun, pero naisulat na sa ibang libro na magpinsan pala sila. So, ako, I admit na may nagkakamali din ako. Pero iba yung level na talagang binabaluktot mo for a certain agenda. At yun nga yung weaponizing of history sa politika. At meron yan. Nangyayari talaga yan.
Sir, may tanong dito sa Q&A namin. Sorry.
Sige po. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Tinatanong ni Jerome Alcantara, history has been used as, in quotes, propaganda for the winner. How do we go beyond that? And how do we avoid that at least?
Well, even for the losers. Alam mo, wag na nating tanggapin yung history is written by the victors. Hindi ko alam kung sinong victors yun. Victors magtanggol. That's the most, luma na yan, cliche na yan. No? Because of Facebook especially, all people have the capacity. Kasi na-democratize mo yung platform eh. Di ba dati, historians lang pinapakinggan, textbook lang. Ngayon, lahat tayo pwedeng sumulat. So kahit tayo, meron na tayong voice ngayon na magsalita ng kasaysayan. And yun yung nakikita natin. Hindi na yan, it's not about victors anymore, but everyone who has an agenda. Kasi pwede naman natalo ka ngayon, sa susunod, ikaw na yung panalo eh. So it doesn't necessarily mean na talo
so
ka
we're all
palagi.
responsible in a way.
Yes. And yun na nga, responsible din tayo because we are teaching our university students that we have to be critical. Diba? So yung critical meaning, titignan mo ba, primary ba yan o secondary source? Hindi lang pang historian yun, madam eh. Mga mams, no? Hindi lang yan pang historian. Talagang it's for everybody na kailangan meron tayong ganung pag-iisip when we are sharing things on Facebook, for example. Diba? But also, di natin matatanggal Vernice and Gemma na meron tayong problem dahil pwede kasing pinaniniwalaan mo na hindi totoo yung kinakalat mo na informasyon. Pero dahil nakakasakit siya, nakakapangasar ka, nakakapikon siya, nakakasakit siya sa kung sino man ang pino-point out mo, nakalaban mo, ay itakalat mo pa rin siya. Yes. So
parang
yun
may purpose kang may purpose ka to influence what?
Well, influence minds. Of course. Kasi tao lang naman nagbabasa ng kasaysayan. So, ini-influencehan mo yung tao na maniwala sa certain agenda. Now, let me have a full disclosure here, ladies and gentlemen. Even historians have an agenda. Kasi wala namang totally objective. There's no such thing as total objectivity. Historians are taught that being objective, wala na yun yung parang Saide, sinasabi nila na totally objective. Si Saide, the way he presents his data and chooses the data, may bias na rin yun. So, actually, walang taong walang bias. Lahat ng entity may bias. I'm sorry to say, people will not admit it, but they have, okay?
That's true.
Pero, yes, may but objectivity, what is objectivity in history? You present both sides if you are presenting. You can believe on your set of data, but you should present at least most of the data that you have para magkaroon ng judgment din yung readers mo. So, yun yung sinasabi natin na yun yung objectivity. Pero kami, for example, ako may agenda ako. Ano bang agenda ko? I always believe that history should help us build ourselves as a nation. Na you just don't think Bicolano or Cebuano or Bisaya or Kapampangan or Ilocano or Tagalog. You think of yourself as part of the community. So that's my agenda as a historian. Some historians would not want that to be their agenda. Ang sasabihin nila, no, kailangan puro national na lang yung ating tinitignan. Dapat tignan natin yung local. So, depende sa historian at sa nagkukwento kung ano ba yung kanyang agenda sa kanyang pagkukwento. And that will affect how he tells his narrative. Kaya you cannot blame people if they have certain ways of telling the story. Hindi pwedeng, for example, Mr. Leloy Claudio, my good friend, he believes na hindi dapat tayo masyadong nationalist. Dahil kailangan tinitingnan na natin post-nationalism na yung ginagawa natin. Di ba dapat ang pagtingin natin sa mundo, global community na yung tinitingnan natin. So may mga ganun. Yun.
May magandang question dito kasi
yes.
And actually siguro parang like if that is the case, 'di ba, you have various perspectives, 'di ba? So paano mo na ngayon ang babasahin mong libro? Like what is the reliable source? Or is it about talking about reliable source or looking at multiple sources or ano bang paano ba dapat tinitingnan ang kasaysayan or ang history to begin with?
Well, tandaan natin na, let's talk about the difference between a historical record and a historical book. Okay? Lahat yan sources, Everything is a source. Pero, ang historical source kasi, yung account, halimbawa, Artemio Ricarte's account of the Revolution, Emilio Aguinaldo's account of the Revolution, yung mga ganyan, o Pigafetta's account of what happened to Lapu-Lapu and Magellan in Mactan. Di ba? These are accounts, but they're not yet history. These are sources of history. Now, ang history book ay ginawa yan ng isang historiador o ng isang historical writer na tinitignan niya yung ibang sources. At gumagawa siya ng narrative na historical at kinokonekta niya ito sa mas malaking narrative of Philippine history or global history or whatever. So, ibig sabihin, hindi lang ito facts. Kasi pag puro trivia lang ang sinasabi mo, ang tawag sa'yo, antiquarian. Hindi ka historian. So, when people talk I'm sorry, this modesty aside, and again, even fact checkers have to be humble that they cannot know everything and they can have mistakes. But I also have to say that not everyone who tells history in Facebook are historians. No? Kasi you have to have a certain level of skill in researching and presenting your data that is acceptable to your peers. Kaya nga mayroong mga referee journals, dumadaan ka dyan minsan. May affirmation kapag kino-quote ka, binabasa ka. So, now, a book that is good. Now, we will not recommend specific books here. Especially, depende yan sa topic. Ano ba, general Philippine history ba yan? Individual lives of people or events. Pero, a good history book cites his sources. Whether you cite it in a bibliographic form, yung may bibliography ka or may footnotes ka, or in text, meaning, ako for example, when I do my Xiao time, kahit nakakainis kong minsan akong basahin, sinasabi ko talaga na ayon sa aklat na ito ni Gemma, ito ang sinasabi ng o ayon sa artikulong ito mula sa Rappler. Hindi ko pwedeng akuin lang. Actually, I'll tell you something. Nung una akong gumawa ng Xiao time, sinasabi yan sa akin na you don't have to cite your source kasi ikaw na yan eh. When you present your data, ikaw na yan. Pero that made Xiao time different eh. Kaya nga, ginagamit sa eskwelahan eh. Modesty aside. Because I cite my sources if it's very contentious or it's a very important source. Sinasabi ko talaga na dito galing yung data ko. So, ganun. So, you have to look at the sources.
Ang importante is to look at and identify the source. So, like, if it's a history book, kasi actually, maraming talking about history books, diba? And talking about books to begin with. Ang daming mga diba? Like, there's been a lot of controversies also about books na having mistakes, diba? So it's important, basically, what's important is malinaw kung saan nanggaling yung yung sinasabi nung and
makikita mo kaya nga historians have a bad a bad habit of not reading the text first but looking at the back to see what are the sources. Bibliography muna yung introduction, acknowledgements, bibliography. Kasi yung makasasabi niya pangalan sa acknowledgements, yun yung mga nakapag-influence ng thinking niya eh. So you have to look at that first before you read the book. Kaya ganun kami magbasa. Napaka-weirdo namin sa totoo lang.
Sorry, there's more than 30 questions in the Q&A panel. I kind of want to go through them lang.
Yeah.
Gemma, wait lang. How many? Are we until what? 5:30?
I think 5:30 is okay.
Good. That's good. Yeah, we can answer a lot of questions.
Okay. This is from Ariane. She says, our history states that our national hero is Rizal, but there are dissenting opinions that Bonifacio should be the national hero because the American education system wanted to forward a narrative of peaceful literary dissent over armed revolt. So which side would be correct in terms of a native non-colonial historical perspective?
Well, even that is contentious. I'll tell you something. There's no law that proclaims Jose Rizal as the national hero, period. So there was no...
So, saan nanggaling yun?
So how do we know that he's our national hero?
He's our national hero because that public acclaimed him to be the national hero. Diba? Emilio Aguinaldo.
So we all just accept it.
Yeah. Yes. And when the Americans came, they just joined the bandwagon and used Rizal. It is not true. I'm sorry. I love Professor Constantino. No? I admire him. I adore him. But I will disagree with him in veneration without understanding, saying that the Americans invented Jose Rizal. He did not. They joined the bandwagon, and true, they used him. But Rizal was already primary to the Filipino people even before he died. Diba? Even Bonifacio admired Rizal.
Yes.
Right, exactly. So, yun yung Now, how do we resolve this? you know the good result, kasi pinag-aawayan natin yan, you know the good result for me, and this is what I always teach, and a lot of historians actually say this, that all of them are national heroes. Jose Rizal is a national hero, Bonifacio is a national hero, di ba?
Yeah. So why do you have to pick one?
Del Pilar is a national hero. Why do you have to pick? And yun na nga I don't want to legislate heroes. Dati gusto ko yan. Pero I don't want to legislate heroes kasi if you legislate heroes, di ba? Vernice, any Tom, Dick, and Harry can become a hero if it can be legislated.
Yeah.
At sasabihin ko, right. Sasabihin ko lang dyan, Kongreso naman na nagsabing bayani siya, hindi naman ng bayan eh. So kapag minsan may mga isyong pangkasaysayan na ang bayan ang nag-decide. Whatever it is, no? In whatever way, ang bayan naman pinapakita niya kung ano yung desisyon niya. Pero yun na nga, minsan, pwede ngang mabaluktot ang kasaysayan, pero tandaan nyo, kaya ang bayan naniniwala. Kasi may mga bagay din na nangyari sa kanya, sa kasaysayan, na parang nag-a-affirm nung kanyang biases eh. So for example, let's be frank about it. Bakit tinitira yung people power revolution kahit napakaganda ng people power? Bakit tinitira si Ninoy at Cory Aquino? Let's be frank about it. Ginamit si Cory at si Ninoy sa politika. Whether for good or for bad. So kapag ginamit mo ang isang historical event o personage sa politika at nanalo ka dahil doon, pag nainis na yung tao sa'yo, babanatan ka talaga. At babanatan yun. Titirahin din yun. So kaya, yun ang golden opportunity for the Marcoses.
Sir, in relation to that, there's a question also from someone who was born in 2003. So they're a baby. Sabi niya,
they're a baby.
Many people regard the late President Cory Aquino as walang nagawa or pinaka-useless or walang kwenta, etc. So sinasabi nila na walang ginawa si Cory Aquino sa kanyang administrasyon, kundi ang nangyari sa Mendiola at ang people power. So para sa inyo, ano po ang naging pinakamalaking ambag ni President Aquino sa kasalukuyan nating panahon?
Well, I have a question. You have internet? Vernice, you have internet?
Yes,
have
I'm
internet,
sure everybody
right?
here has internet.
Yeah, can you speak freely in that Facebook of yours kahit pa paano? Sometimes you fear the government, but you can still talk whatever you want. Sa totoo lang, na ikaw naman nagsa-censor sa sarili mo minsan because of the repercussions. But you have the platform. Diba? Now, I'll tell you something. In 1986, if Marcos did not fall, I don't think the internet will be born in the Philippines. Yun yung, kasi the opening up of the democratic space. Now, remember, ang pinakamalaking ambag talaga niya, yung opening of the democratic space. Remember, she was a dictator for 1 year. She was a dictator with absolute powers. And people have said, to restructure the government, she should have extended that absolute power thingy for about 3 to 4 years. Or even to the whole administration, 6 years. So sabi nila, dapat si Cory naging diktador para naayos niya yung lipunan. Eh ang problema, yung Ale, kating-kating na mawala sa kanya yung kapangyarihan dahil gusto niya mag-emanate na sa tao yung kapangyarihan through the new Congress that will be elected. That's why yung 1987 Constitution, which was again, by the way, hindi lang people power ang basis natin for Cory's power. The 1987 Constitution was overwhelmingly approved, and that is her legacy to the Filipino people. I think 80%, I forgot. You look at the sources, no? Pero napakalaki majority of the people. Kahit sino walang ganong kalaking kapangyarihan na binigay sa kanyang bayan. Now, yung palang restoration of democracy after a 20-year-old, that's already very hard, my kaibigan. Ikaw kaya ang maupo doon para ano yon. Now, I'm not saying that. Ayoko yung argument na yun kasi ginagamit yan sa atin. Pero kung ikaw man ang mauupo doon, mahihirapan ka rin. Number 1. Number 2, 9 coup d'etat, 9 coup attempts. What are we going to do? Diba? Pero ang dami ring na-institute na reform. So for example, maraming naglabasan na NGOs at that time, during the time of Cory, na tumulong sa pamahalaan na tulungan ng bayan. Kasi totoo lang, di naman kayang tulungan ng pamahalaan na lahat. And of course, kasi pag nag-NGO ka, komunista ka, pwede ka nahulihin. Ganun ang isipan ng martial law eh. And yung pagtatatag ng Information Technology Commission, na pinamunuan ni William Torres. Yan na, tinignan nila yung internet at yan yung reason kung bakit patuloy yung pag-aaral sa internet until panahon na ni Ramos, 1995, the internet was born in the Philippines. But it was started because we opened democratic space. Now, of course, there's Mendiola Massacre. Napakahirap nun. But remember, kakatapos lang din ng military noon at that time na under 20 years na alam mo yun yung pag-iisip ng mga militar na at yung pulis na ganun na carry over yan. And in fact, hindi natin na-absuelto si Cory kasi akala niya magiging effective yung mga KAFGU na yung armasan mo yung community para labanan ng mga komunista. Ang mga loko-loko, gumawa din ng mga kalokohan nila. Yun yung problem doon na marami din talagang misstep si Cory Aquino. But at that time, we're having baby steps in democracy. So mahihirapan talaga yung Ale. So you recognize her mistakes and her faults and her limitations. Hasyendera eh. Diba? I mean, hindi ko sinasabing bobo siya sa politika. In fact, she was politically adept. It's not true. She was shrewd. She was shrewd. But the democracy that she knows is elite democracy. You cannot expect her to just, change everything because she came from the political elite. Diba? But you also recognize, and of course, meron namang mga record dyan sa internet yun, yung the Aquino record of the presidency, kung ano yung mga iba pa niyang nagawa. No?
So,
para
we're
sa
actually
bayan.
talking here about yung selection ng facts, no? Like,
yes,
Kung
exactly.
ano to, parang pinag-uusapan natin is, okay, totoo to, pero totoo to, pero totoo din to. And ang problema is like when we're just selecting a few facts to support a particular claim or a particular broad judgment. Is that it?
Yes, exactly. Pero ganun din, kahit historians naman ginagawa yan. Pero, for example, every time I talk about Ferdinand Marcos, for example, my thesis is on Imelda's Manila, governance of Metro Manila. And I recognize her for some of the initiatives of the Metropolitan Manila Commission. Kasi hindi naman nila magagawa yun kung hindi siya diktadora. Kung hindi siya first lady. Well, she was a co-dictator in a way, but she was so powerful that she had actually very good initiatives na inisip ng mga tao niya. Diba? So, I recognize her for that. Totoo din yun. That's why, kaya nga, mahirap din yung kinakalaban mo nga yung taong nagsasabing naging magaling sila. Kasi hindi mo naman pwedeng sabihin na hindi sila naging magaling. May mga initiative talaga silang magaganda. Pero tingnan mo rin na ito rin yung ginawa nila on the other side, which is the plunder, yung mismanagement of the economy, especially after the 1978, no? The oil shock crisis, and yung pagbaba ng ekonomiya natin. Kasi, di ba sinasabi nila, golden age yung martial law pagdating sa economy. Pero tingnan mo ang GDP natin, talaga namang tumaas noong 1973. No? So, alam mong totoo din yun na sa totoo lang, si Marcos ang nagdala sa atin sa pinaka-highest part ng ating economy. And if he stopped probably in 78, he would have been the best president economy-wise. But
except
of course,
lumagpas siya doon.
Because he did not know when to stop. Nasiyahan eh. Di ba? Nasiyahan eh. So, naabutan siya ng oil shock crisis which is an external force. So, hindi lang yung mismanagement niya ng economy ang factor. May international factor din. Pero, ang problema kasi kay Marcos, nag-work sa kanya yung alam mo yung stimulus, yung uutang ka para gumawa ka ng infrastructure. Kasi yung infrastructure na yun yung magbo-boom ng ekonomiya mo. Yes. It worked in the 70s. Pero nung bumaba na yung ekonomiya natin, ito yung in-explain sa akin ng isang ng isang economic historian. Na nung bumaba na si Vanny Biernas, na nung bumaba na yung ekonomiya natin, tapos gumagawa pa rin siya ng infrastructure, hindi mo na pwedeng gawin yon kasi babagsak talaga ang ekonomiya mo. At bumagsak talaga tayo noong 1983 bago pa man patayin si Ninoy. The lowest level of our economy, yung recession since World War II. So yun totoo yun. So yung Marcos the Great and Marcos the Plunderer and the Bad Marcos,
they're both
din yun.
They're
both true, but you have to weigh in saan ba tayo ano ba yung epekto ng lahat ng yan sa atin? 'Di ba? So may epekto yung infrastructure, Pero may epekto rin yung halimbawa, yung sinasabi nila na naapektuhan yung mga korte, 'di ba? Na yung mga pulis, militar na naging masama yung pangalan nila noon, 'di ba?
Or the monopolies, 'di ba?
Yung mga monopoly at yung mga cronies, 'di ba? Na yun nga, yung impunity that although hindi nag-start sa kanila, hindi naman nag-start sa kanila yung impunity ay na-aggravate nung panahon nila na nagnakaw na 10 bilyon, hindi nakulong. Hindi ako din, kaya ko ding magnakaw. O di yan ang ginagawa nilang lahat.
So actually, maraming questions dito sa sa chat room, and then also 44 questions in the Q&A. But I want to So when we talk about, kasi ito yung madalas na pinag-uusapan sa sa internet yung hidden history, binago daw nila Visayan at mga ganun-ganun.
Okay.
Ano bang doon? Parang what exactly are we talking about here?
Okay.
Parang and is it Is it really hidden history or meron portion of history na tinitingnan mo, 'di ba? At yun yung because of certain things or
beautiful question. Beautiful question. May sinasabi silang hidden histories na talagang hindi totoo. Kaya siya hidden kasi hindi talaga siya totoo. Inimbento lang siya at ngayon lang siya lumabas. Dahil amazing, actually, mas amazing siya pag sobrang out of the box and out of the ordinary. Mas outrageous ang claim, mas kapani-paniwala. Yan yung problem dyan. Yeah, kasi
parang yung
mas madaling paniwalaan yun Dahil, wow, ang galing nila, ganyan. Now, okay. Pero a lot of the hidden histories, they're saying, totoo din naman na may ganitong nangyari. Pero hindi na na-highlight ngayon. Pero I have to say that they were not hidden. And definitely not hidden by the historians. What's the problem now? Simple.
Okay.
At ito, na-realize ko to. May mga bagay na sinasabi silang hidden history. Tapos pag nakita namin, alam na namin yan.
So, hindi siya hidden.
Namin yan. Hindi siya hidden. In fact, ang daming libro na nagsasabi ng mga sinasabi lang hidden. Now, what happened there? Simple lang. Because a lot of those information, one, ay napunta lamang sa mga akademikong katulad namin.
Hindi siya napupunta sa textbooks or ganon?
Kami lang ang nagbabasa. Kasi, ma'am, hindi naman lahat ng bagay dapat mong i-textbook Kakapal naman yung textbook natin. Talagang namimili ka talaga ng importante lang. Tapos hayaan mong magbasa yung bata kung gusto niya. Pero, tandaan nyo, public history, although yan ay ginagawa na ng mga tao nung unang panahon pa, di ba sina Ambet Ocampo, sina Chitang Guerrero Nakpil, sina Esteban de Ocampo, kahit sina Mariano Ponce, Jaime de Vera, and even Rizal. Di ba? Ang sinasabi nila na yung public history kasi ay hindi nire-respeto matagal na panahon at hindi masyadong na-appreciate yung public history. Meaning, kasi may academic history, yung pinag-aaralan ng historians, di ba?
Okay.
Pero yung public history, kung paano namin binibigay yung information sa madla, sa paraan na naiintindihan nila. So, you use social media,
parang hindi lang na-communicate?
Correct.
Hindi lang na-communicate yung history?
That's one.
So, nandun ka, pero hindi lang na-i-share.
Kaya, at totoo yan kasi, puro wikang Ingles yung ginagamit din sa mga aklat madalas. Kaya nga sinasabi ko, yung kasaysayang pangmadla, kasi tinatranslate ko yung concept of public history into kasaysayang pangmadla. Pero yung kasaysayang pangmadla, kailangan nasa wikang naiintindihan ng tao. Kaya nga importante rin yung kaya yung shout time nasa Filipino So kapag kasaysayang pangmadla ang ginagawa mo, nagsasalita ka sa wikang naiintindihan ng mga Pilipino. So, yun yung isa. Now, the other thing, third answer to the question is this, and it's a multifaceted answer. The third is, hindi yan hidden history. Kaso, alam yan nung nakaraang henerasyon. Pero dahil kakapanganak mo pa lang,
hindi mo alam.
Akala mo, hidden na. No, nabasa mo, hindi ko alam to. Therefore, hidden. Yun yung nangyari. Dahil, akala ng mga historians, di ba? Kami, binabanatan kami mga public historians, mga nagkakasaysayang pangmadla. si Ambet, paulit-ulit yung sinasabi. Si Xiao Chua, paulit-ulit ang sinasabi. Pero hindi nyo ba alam, mga kaibigan, na dapat talaga inuulit-ulit ang kasaysayan? Bakit? Inuulit-ulit yan sapagkat may bagong pinapanganak. Alam mo ba na habang pinipitik-pitik ko ang kamay ko dito, may isang taong pinapanganak sa Pilipinas.
So, inuulit-ulit, meaning sa school, sa
kahit sa pagsusulat. Diba? Sasabihin nila, ba't sinusulat ni Xiao Chua yan eh? Wala namang bago kang matututunan kay Xiao Chua. Ikaw wala kang matututunan na bago kasi matagal ka na nagkakasaysayan. Pero yung kapapanganak pa lang at kakalaki pa lang, matututo yun sa akin. Yun yung sinasabi natin na kailangan ulit-ulitin ng pagkukwento ng kasaysayan. So, bakit hindi na naaalala yung mga ginawa ni Marcos? Kasi may time sa panahon na nag-relax tayo at sinabi natin, hindi na kailangang, kasi old wounds yan. Nasasaktan lang tayo, di ba? At saka, may problema din ng mga magulang kasi, ikaw ba may narinig ka na ba ever na ang magulang mo ay nagkwento sa'yo ng kasaysayan? O kahit yung experience nila nung panahon nila. Di ba madalang? Yung pagliligawan nila, nakipaglandian ba sila nung nanay mo, tatay mo? Hindi nila kinikwento yun. Di ba? Yung mga karanasan nila kasi ang magulang na Pilipino ay hindi nakukwento na nakaraan nila sa anak nila. Maraming ganun.
May efforts ba to make that more accessible kasi? Kasi marami ditong, so hindi ko na sila iisa-isahin, but there's quite a lot of questions here that has to do with sources. Ano ba yung gagawin namin? Resources na kasi I think marami dito sa mga nag-a-attend ngayon are mga teachers. So paano namin malalaman at ano ba ang reliable to begin with?
Hindi, yun na nga yun eh. Kaya nga, dahil hindi naman tayo, ayaw naman nating i-spoon-feed yung mga tao, no? Yung sinabi ko kanina na metodolohiya, primary, secondary, hanapin kung mga sources, ganun kayo gagawa ng judgment. Pero ang problema din kasi, madam, yung accessibility. Kasi sa totoo lang, hindi naman lahat available sa National Bookstore eh.
Totoo.
Yung mga UP Press at yung mga Ateneo Press, hindi naman masyadong nabebenta dyan. Yung National Bookstore nga, naging National Stationery Store na. Diba? Sorry nagbibiro lang ako. Baka iban na ako sa... Love ko kayo National Bookstore, ano? Pero yun na nga.
May iba pang text, bookstore.
Oo. So, ano yung problema mo? Number 1, wika. Dahil lahat ng libro halos nasa Ingles. Diba? So, kailangan gumawa tayo ng mga aklat at meron naman na Philippine history. Pero hindi mo sila mabili sa mga bookstore. So, kailangan a-attend ka ng mga seminar, diba? Para ma-meet mo yung mga historian na nagbebenta ng libro. So, tandaan nyo mabuti, kung kayo'y guro ng kasaysayan, kayo po ay makipag-partner at sumali sa mga historical organization. PHA, Philippine Historical Association, may National Historical Society.
We will send a list sa mga kasi basically
bakas.
Kasi basically ang daming mga questions dito on sources and then ano yung recommended books. Pero you're saying, sir, na hindi ito sa specific books but it's in the process, 'di ba? Yung understanding the methodology.
Exactly. At saka pwede kasi na hindi ka nagre-rely sa isang libro lang. Yun kasi yung problema. Kasi for example, hindi ito bayad eh. So, hindi ako pwede magsabi ng mga publishing companies o ng libro. Di ba? Pero kailangan titignan nyo yun, yung credibility ng author. Di ba? Ganon yung titignan ninyo. At kung magagamit nyo talaga. And, of course, kailangan may skill na kayo dyan. Hindi siya yung parang kailangan sasabihan kayo. Although may mga recommended, pero pwede rin, halimbawa, syempre, yung History of the Filipino People ni Teodoro Agoncillo, medyo luma na kasi. Pero marami ka pa rin makukuha dyan na maganda. Diba? Yung kay Constantino, yung The Past Revisited at saka The Continuing Past. Napakagandang libro din yan. Pero may mga mas bago. Halimbawa, yung kay Luis Francia, yung History of the Philippines. Pero si Luis Francia ay isang writer. Hindi siya talaga historian. Pero maganda yung pagkasulat niya nung summary ng facts about Philippine history. Kung gusto mo ng mass interpretation, yung kasaysayang bayan ng adhika ng Pilipinas, although hanggang EDSA DOS lang yon 2001, maganda rin yung kung gusto mo ng mas political history, yung kay Abinales at saka kay Donna Amoroso, yung asawa niya, yung yung society and state in the Philippines, no? Na political ang history, political yung basa. At marami pang iba na pwede mo bili. Yan yung mga pwede mong libro. Diyan ka magsimula, 'di ba? Si Xiao Salazar, pwede mong i-download yung kanyang Balangkas ng Kasaysayan ng Pilipinas, Kapilipinuhan na nasa internet. Yes. Xiao Salazar, Pantayong Pananaw.
Yung bathala ng history.
Abang sarap naman, teacher ko yan. Sarap naman. No, yun, Pantayong Pananaw, di ba? So yun, pwede ka mag-start sa mga yan, na basahin. Pero pagka may mga individual books din for other topics.
So would you say parang you treat yung mga textbooks bilang parang balangkas?
Yes.
No? Parang outline. Pero
gabay lamang po sila.
Oo. Magandang tumingin din sa iba't ibang mga sources pag nagtuturo ka. Kasi the reason why I'm asking that, may question dito na do you agree that there's a need to improve how history is taught in Philippine schools? Can this be a better deterrent for people believing in fake narratives in the future?
Well, there's a reform now, di ba, in the education system, yung K-12. Tapos sa higher education, ginawang readings in Philippine history, hindi na Philippine history. Na minsan, ang problema, nagiging tukol siya sa readings, hindi siya sa history. So, imbis na inaangkla mo yung readings sa understanding of Philippine history, ang nangyayari sa kanya, ang pinag-aaralan, totoo ba yung retraction, yung naging yung dokumento ang tuon, which is not supposed to be the case. Diba? Na dapat ina-analyze mo yung dokumento for an understanding of Philippine history, not to cause trivia. Ang trivia in the source o yung information about the source. So, medyo mali yun dun sa ganung, kung titingnan mo sa ganung punto. And although, yun nga, how do you improve? You go to seminars. Diba? You go to seminars.
So, go to these communities ng mga mga historians kung nagtuturo ka ng history.
Kasi halimbawa, kung sa Facebook community ka lang talaga, kung ano yung isip ng mga tao doon, yun din ang magiging kaisipan mo. Kung gusto mo matuto ng kasaysayan, di makihang up ka sa mga nag-aaral at mahilig sa kasaysayan. Diba? Na pwede mong ma-meet, diba? Sa mga conferences. Ang dami yung webinars. Actually, yung Facebook ng Philippine Historical Association, pwede yung i-like yun. Diba? Tapos, pwede kayong sumama sa mga webinars, no? Ng mga, yung Bakas, Bagong Kasaysayan, may webinar series din sila. No? So, ang dami mong pwedeng pagkunan ng, kasi ganito yan we do not spoon feed you all the information. But, in always listening and reading the way historians work, diba?
Then you understand.
Yes. You will have an appeal of how people should think history. Diba? Na again,
critical thinking po. It's teaching critical thinking. It's teaching
definitely.
Looking at actually verifying, parang double checking things, mga ganon.
Right. Na yun talaga yun. And kaya nga ako din advocate din ako na dapat ibalik sa high school yung Philippine history. Kasi naging dalawa siya doon sa actually maganda na nga naging dalawang subject kaso sa elementary grade 5 and 6 minsan ang hirap mag-discuss ng mga contentious topics sa history. 'Di ba kapag ka grade 5 and 6, 'di ba? Yung torture ba ng mga tao ng martial law, may kukwento mo ba yung atrocities?
But hindi ba yung ituturo mo doon?
Ha?
May sa mga ganon. I mean, depende sa sa age nila, ganon.
Right. Age Pero yun na nga, kailangan talaga, kasi kaya nga sinasabi lang, repetitious daw yung history, kaya tinanggal sa high school dahil napag-aralan naman sa elementary. Sabi ko nga, dapat talaga paulit-ulit yung kasaysayan. Ito nga nakakatawa sa totoo lang, ang dami sa mga nakikinig sa akin ngayon, alam naman na lahat na itong sinasabi ko. Paulit-ulit na akong pinapanood sa webinar, hindi nagsasawa kasi kapag lagi mo ako nga natuto lang natuto akong magkwento ng kasaysayan kasi naging tour guide ako. Tapos lagi kong inuulit-ulit yung mga sinasabi ko, nagiging kabisado ko siya. And naisa sa puso ko siya. At kahit si Ambet Ocampo for example, pag pinapakinggan ko, yung iba mga sinulat niya, alam ko na yung mga sinasabi niya, nasa mga libro niya, nakabisado ko na halos dahil love na love ko siya, lalo na nung bata ako. Pero kahit pakinggan mo siya ngayon, parang nakakatawa pa din kahit alam mo na yung joke, di ba? Ganun eh. It's beautiful to always read history kahit nabasa mo na yan.
So, parang dalawang things pala to, sir, no? Parang you have the, like, when you're teaching history, may parang like overview ka, pero also parang ganda din na yung details naman ay nakakatulong para maging mas parang buhay yung kasaysayan, no? Yung pagtuturo ng kasaysayan. Pero it's not about the
interesting. Yes. Correct.
But it's about the broad, like how do you assess and
And also like this, did you feel proud about yourself listening to this? Or did you have lessons that you realized about our identity, whether wrong or right? Diba? Or hindi wrong and right, hindi tamang term whether you like it or not, diba? Ganun yun eh. Kailangan nagpapa-realize siya ng mga malalaking truths din about us. 'Di ba? Yun para magkaroon siya ng saysay kasi kaya nga yan kasaysayan sa Filipino. Dahil hindi lang ito pagkukwento. Hindi ito basta-basta kwento. Meron itong saysay, may kapangyarihan ito, Ma'am Gemma, na pwede tayong magabayan. Yun yung
it's not about the tidbits, the trivia, but it's about the lessons.
That's why may fear din ako dun sa yung dahil siyempre alam mo nasa digmaan kasi tayo, Gemma, kaya fact-checking yung termino natin. Pero sa totoo lang, uncomfortable ako sa fact-checking kasi pag yung fact-checking ay yun lang ang naging tuon mo sa history, you actually lose your side to yung the bigger joys of history, which is yung journey. 'Di ba yung journey? Kasi a lot of the things na nga, hindi mo mapa-fact check dahil limitado yung sources. 'Di ba? Pero why did people think this way? Why did they even create the fake news or the fake information? Because there's a journey that happened there. And yung journey na yun yung so it's not just a simple fact checking, but to arrive at a conclusion why they created such myths and why is there a need to feed to some emotions, beliefs of people. That's why nagkaroon ng mga ganitong klaseng mga mito.
But does that mean so there's diba? There's the there's the need to they arrived at this because of certain needs, diba? You said.
Right.
Does that mean hindi kailangan yung pag check?
Hindi naman. Again, you fact check when it is very necessary. Diba? Talagang there are times na you cannot fact check because of the lack of sources. There are times that you don't fact check because you don't need to fact check. Diba? Kasi parang recognize naman na yan ng lahat. Di tanggapin mo na. Diba? At wala namang away. Pero yun na nga, pag nagiging contentious lang, doon lang talaga yung need ng fact-checking, di ba? And again, even fact-checking, may need talaga na pinufulfill itong fact-checking. So whether halimbawa, pina-fact-check mo provenance ng isang document o isang bagay kasi ibebenta mo pala siya at gusto mong mag-appreciate yung prices sa isang auction. That's one way of a reason why you fact-check. Di ba? And of course, you fact-check also because you're in an argument with someone. Di ba? Kaya may fact-check ka. So, kaya tayo nagpa-fact-check kasi may mga tao na sa tingin natin ay binabaluktot ng kasaysayan dahil sa kanilang mga agenda. At yun yung kailangan tugunan, no? Kung ano man yun. Pero, ang problem kasi is that sometimes we fact-check, di ba? Pero, minsan, nagkakamali din tayo o minsan, may mga tao tayong kasama, not necessarily tayo, Gemma, no?
Yes.
Na sila rin gumagawa ng kabuktutan o pagbabaluktot ng kasaysayan laban doon sa mga tinatawag nating nambabaluktot ng kasaysayan, which defeats the purpose of what we're doing. Diba? That is why kailangan, even as fact-checkers, we should have humility. We should have humility, and even as teachers, as historians, na we should have humility that we're not infallible, that fact-checking has limitations, pero it is a skill that is needed because you are surrounded with information all the time eh. So as much as possible, hindi mo lang siya tatanggapin. Meron kang iisipin na isang question o dalawang question o tatlong question, saan ba nanggaling ito? 'Di ba? Talaga bang yun na yun eh. Kasi 'di ba? Kaya minsan may mga may namimintas sa atin na bakit naman yung sa Rappler hinighlight nila kung si Magellan ba talaga pinatay talaga ni Lapu-Lapu. Siya mismo. 'Di ba? Totoo yun na talagang contentious talaga yun kasi sa totoo lang, sinasagot ko na to kasi nasa poster niyo, no? Si Pigafetta,
pang tease lang yun.
Diba? Si Pigafetta, 'di ba si Pigafetta, ang sinabi niya, si Lapu-Lapu lumitaw lang before the battle. Sabi niya na kung kayo ay may mga ano yung sabi niya? Maganda yung sinabi niya. Gusto ko ma-inspire tayo sa sinabi niya yun eh. Ang sabi niya, ayun, no? Ito. Ito maganda eh. Kaya lang ayun, parang sinabi niya na kung kayo ay may mayroong mga pinatigas na bakal, kami naman ay may mga pinatulis na kahoy na pinatibay ng apoy. Imagine.
Sinabi ni
ni Lapu-Lapu. Doon sa messenger ni Magellan. So, pero doon sa pagtinignan mo yung account.
Nga naman si at medyo din si Lapu-Lapu.
Yes. Pero yung account kasi pinagtulungan siya ng mga tao ni Lapu-Lapu. Yun yung totoo, hindi siya one-on-one battle.
And matanda na daw noon si Lapu-Lapu.
Dahil may isang nakakita sa kanya na Kastila na nagkwento sa isang Portuguese historian. So, again, totoo yun na pero yun na nga, kung malaman natin yun, does it change our narrative of history, our perspective that Lapu-Lapu is a great warrior? Kung hindi siya yung pumatay kay Magellan? Diba? Na-invalidate ba yung kanyang pagiging unang bayani? Diba? Na-invalidate ba yan? Diba? Siya yung unang recorded na bayani. We go to the larger questions, Gemma, Vernice. At si Pauline ba yun? Si Raisa, yeah. Sorry, Raisa. And MOVEPH.
Wala si Pauline ngayon.
Sorry. Di ba? Parang ang dyan, yung bang pinagtanggol ni Lapu-Lapu ay Pilipinas na ba yun? Bakit siya gagawing bayani ng Pilipinas? Kung hindi naman niya pinagtanggol ang Pilipinas, ay wala pa namang Pilipinas noon.
Totoo.
At isa pang question dyan, Madam.
Ay, nawala.
Naka-mute ka ata.
Hello? Saka lang ha?
Yes. Okay na.
May tumatawag sa akin. Huwag kang tatawag, busy ako. Ito, nawala tuloy ako. Ito. So, yung isa pang question dyan, was he really a hero? Kasi ang sinasabi nila, no? Ay kung parang tinitignan yata kung live tayo, imaginein mo yun. Tumatawag, hindi, kasi si Lapu-Lapu daw, kung daw si Magellan ay unang lumapit kay Lapu-Lapu, no? Kung si Magellan ay unang lumapit kay Lapu-Lapu, si Lapu-Lapu daw, i-welcome naman si Magellan. Kaso, nagselos si Lapu-Lapu kasi napunta kay Humabon.
So, may ganung
internal conflict pala yun. So, ibig sabihin,
not precisely yet defending the Philippines because wala Pilipinas nga galing sa kay diba? Sa pangalan ng King Philip. Oo.
Kaya nga ako, ang interpretation ko diyan, ininterpret ko na to kasi tandaan mo, kung meron ka namang kakayahang gumawa ng narrative tulad ng mga libro, 'di ba? Pinapakinggan niyo naman ako. Ito yung hinahapag kong narrative sa inyo. Kung tanggapin nyo, okay lang. Na kahit na internal conflict talaga yung nangyari kay Lapu-Lapu at Magellan at Humabon, bayani pa rin si Lapu-Lapu kasi si Magellan ay nanghimasok kasi sa affairs natin. At si Lapu-Lapu, yung pinakaunang bayani na lumaban sa panghihimasok ng dayuhan sa ating affairs. So, that means bayani siya. So, ganun ko. Kaya dapat i-celebrate natin, Gemma, Vernice at Raisa. At kayong lahat na nandito, na kailangan i-celebrate natin yung quincentennial sa 2021. Dahil
may ano ba doon? May debate ba doon on whether
Meron eh. Yun guys, sinasabi, hindi naman bayani si Lapu-Lapu. Tsaka, ba't isa-celebrate yung quincentennial? Si Magellan naman ang bida dyan. Hindi si Magellan Pero i-recognize natin si Magellan, siya yung unang hindi siya yung unang nakaikot ng mundo, pero siya yung unang nag-isip na umikot sa mundo. At yun yung achievement of mankind dahil sa kanya na nakaikot tayo sa mundo at nalaman natin yun. Pero i-recognize din natin si Lapu-Lapu dahil nanalo sa panghihimasok kay ni Magellan. So, yeah, it's a big celebration, Gemma. That's why, I advise everyone to look at the NQC National Quincentennial Committee website, Facebook, and you will have a lot of information there.
And we will help promote that.
Yes. Actually, lagi sino to si ba tong sa presidente, yung naka-assign sa inyo kay presidente?
Si Pia.
Oo, si Pia Manada. Yan, laging nakakatuwa nga, laging pinopromote din ng NHCP. Again, I'm a critic of the president. I have to, to have a full disclosure here. Pero I want to help the NHCP. That's why, kasi history naman eh. Ang amo ko ay kasaysayan eh, hindi ang kung sino mang politiko.
So two things actually. Meron dito kasing question. As a historian, what's the best way to argue that a certain view is based on facts rather than a matter of interpretation?
Ay, di present the facts.
Present the facts. No.
Of course, present how you found this very clearly. Di ba? Ganito lang naman yan. Ito ang gusto kong patunayan. Si ganito ay si ganito. 1, pack, 2, pack, 3, pack. Itong pinagmulan. Tapos.
Right.
Di ba? Ang dami kasi tayong magsulat minsan na tayo yung mateorya. Well, I'm not blaming you guys kasi mahilig kayo sa teorya. Pero, minsan nalulunod yung mga tao sa kakabasa na ano bang point na itong taong ito? Diba?
So it has to be a balance, no? Na like being able to communicate and also yung presenting the facts and then substantiating it.
Right, exactly.
May may binanggit ka kanina, like you actually did this, like nag-disclosure ka. How critical is disclosure? Like being able to, like parang in something like this.
Well, tandaan nyo na for example, sige, alam naman ng tao to kaya hindi ko sinasabi, pero in disclosure ko, I am pro-human rights, I am pro-democracy, diba? I am anti-dictatorship and anti-tyranny, kaya ganun ang pagbasa ko kay Marcos. Diba? Iba yung magiging pagbasa mo kay Marcos kung ikaw ay pro-government or pro-strong government and parang may certain anti-ideological feelings ka doon sa ibang ideology. Diba? So, yung disclosure na yun helps people to know and weigh what you're going to say against your background. So, for example, anything that I say about Duterte, you have to weigh in that I am critical against him. So whether I praise him or not, or I attack him or I praise him, you have to realize, kasi ganito yan eh, doon mo makikita na, objective siya, kahit may bias siya. O kahit meron siyang leaning, objective siya. Kasi kahit kritiko siya ni Duterte, at ayaw niya sa human rights record ni Duterte, nakikita niya na yung build ay baka makatulong sa lipunan. Diba?
So, bali, you disclose, and then parang it gives people an idea on your perspective.
Right. It also gives them the idea na kung ikaw, ratsada ka lang na ratsada laban sa presidente, alam na nila na yun yung leanings mo. Diba? Pero, nagiging wonderful yun kung minsan, alam mo yun kasi madalang na lang ngayon halos, hindi ko sinasabing madalang. I think silent lang sila. Yung mga silent people pero very level-headed na nakakapagtimbang. Kasi kailangan parehas ka lang eh. Oo, anti-Duterte ako. Oo, anti-Marcos ako. Pero kung may nagawa silang maganda, parehas ka. Yun yung kailangan doon.
Meron ditong question from Marie Beatrice Gulinaw. Ang sabi niya, it's regarding necessary fictions which you discussed. Sabi niya, how is this different from asserting fake claims? For instance, Philippines is an exemplar in fighting COVID, to boost Philippine pride, to correct these necessary fictions.
Sorry, just jumping in. We have 7 minutes na lang.
Okay.
Wow. I just wanted to leave it there. Yeah.
We have to select questions, no? But yeah, ganito, well, the data is there, pero it is the way you read data that sometimes makes a difference. So for example, ang pinaka-paboritong data yung pag-compare. So pag kinompare mo sa US, sa Italy, sa Europe, tapos yung Pilipinas, ito yung kaso, ito yung US, talagang magmumukha talagang parang na-control ang COVID. Okay? And ako, I believe in a certain extent that the general quarantines, the enhanced quarantines were able to help slow the disease. I have to say that. And in fairness to the government. Pero, ang problema dyan, bakit konti yung kaso mo? Nagte-test, yung testing mo ba ay mass na? Kasi baka hindi pa masyadong mass yung test mo, talagang hindi mo malalaman kung gaano karami yung taong may COVID. Di ba? Tapos, pag kinumpare mo naman yung iyong data sa Southeast Asia, kumusta ka naman? Kasi, huwag mo i-compare yung sarili mo sa Amerika kasi apple and oranges yung kino-compare mo dyan. Kailangan i-compare mo yung sarili mo sa ka-level mong bansa. Di ba? Sa Southeast Asia, marami tayong ka-level na bansa dyan. How are they faring with COVID? Parang tayo, hindi masyadong maganda. Di ba? I'm not sure. I have to look at the data first. I'm being unfair here. I don't have the data. Pero yan yung dapat yung i-consider. Yung pag kino-compare. At paano ba kino-compare? Di ba? Yun yung kailangan doon. So, you have to look at it na how did they use the data? Because the data is there. And kung yung data, kung perfect yung data mo, kung hindi perfect yung data mo, iba pang usapan yun.
So going to yung pride and then imagined histories, it's really can you just give how do you make sure na you're not when you're looking at that, parang 'di ba na totoo naman yun na kailangan mo mag-imagine, 'di ba? That's part of nation building, 'di ba? Yung nagbi-build ka ng isang parang when does it become problematic? Yung ganon, yung level of imagination.
Okay, very
ba,
good, no?
Parang paano ba natin siya ibabalanse yung mga bagay-bagay na ganon. And then
that's true, Kasi imagination, alam mo, yun na nga it's not just about facts. Kasi even Teodoro Agoncillo talked about historical imagination And historical imagination based on facts, di ba? And based on the data that you have. Pero also, for example, how do you imagine the nation, di ba? Kasi dati wala namang bansang Pilipinas teritoryo lang tayo na pinagsama-sama ng mga Kastila Pero paano tayo in-imagine ni na Rizal, ni na Bonifacio? They looked at the past and looked at some facts of the past to say, this is who we are and this is our connectedness with each other. Kaya ako, ginagawa ko yan ngayon by looking at our Austronesian heritage. Yung maritime culture, yung pagkakapare-pareho ng beliefs based on the maritime culture and all of that, no? So, kaya nasasabi ko, we can be one nation because we came from one Austronesian culture. Now, yan yung mga imagination na siguro dahil bansa na tayo ngayon at kailangan natin magkaisa, yun yung gagawin natin. It's in the mind, it was created, but we have made it a reality already. Diba? Bansang Pilipinas na tayo, yung nangyayari sa atin sa COVID, bilang bansang Pilipinas, totoo yan. Yung nangyayari sa atin dito sa Pilipinas dahil sa mga collective decisions natin bilang bansa, totoo yan. Yung kultura na pinapakita natin, how do we deal with, kasi iba pang usapan yun na bakit yung human rights. Halimbawa, mahaba to pero hindi ko I would not deal with this. Pero papatikimin ko lang kayo yung human rights concept natin. Bakit sinasabi nila na bakit yung criminal sa atin hindi na natin tinuturing na tao, walang human rights. Kasi sa kultura natin, ang turing na natin sa criminal, kahit wala pang trial, ay aswang. Nakakasira sa lipunan at kailangan lipulin. Diba? So, yung kultura na yun, totoo na yun Yung minamanifest natin because of that culture, hindi na imagine yun. Ginagawa natin sa electoral, hindi ba? Nag-e-elect na tayo ng mga tao based on that. Diba? Gumagawa tayo ng mga desisyon araw-araw based on that. It's the reality of our lives now. We are a Filipino nation. That's real already. We were imagined, but it's now real. So, yun yung kailangan nating tignan ngayon na mga bagay-bagay. Kaya, yun yung ano natin. Yun yung parang sinasabi lang natin, nagiging dangerous ito, yung pala yung tanong. My God.
Yeah.
Nagiging dangerous ito kasi kapag pwede tayong mapunta sa kapahamakan.
That's actually where I'm going. Okay. So, saan, ano yung dangers? Like with, kasi, again, going back to, kasi nasa fact-checking webinar tayo.
Yeah.
What is the danger with not naman, like parang, okay, letting nationalism, diba? Like having that, because you're thinking about, parang forming something,
yes.
collective imagination and all of that. You're not adhering to that set of facts that you agree to. Anong doon? May danger ba yon? Yung
ganito,
parang a collective
yes.
facts?
Well, of course, the danger there is, una, yung kailangan kasi we talk about things Kasi kung bansa na tayo kung kanya-kanya tayong mag-isip, 'di ba? Paano tayo magbubuklod para sa mga common goals natin? 'Di ba? Kasi tandaan nyo, may time sa Pilipinas na nung panahon halimbawa ni Fidel Ramos, hindi ko sinasabing perfect president siya, no? Meron din siyang mga ewan, pero alam mo yon, yung panahon niya parang coalition building, walang masyadong ingay sa politika kasi open arms siya sa pag-build ng coalitions, compromise, etc. No, na ibig sabihin parang may semblance na ay pwede pala tayo mag-usap-usap tungkol sa ating sarili dahil isang bansa tayo. Pag-usapan natin kung ano nakakabuti, nakakasama sa atin. Pag-usapan natin yung pagkakapareho natin at mga kaibahan natin. 'Di ba? Pero kapag hindi natin ginawa yun, nagkanya-kanya tayo, bakit pa tayo naging bansa? Yun yung problema dyan. Hindi humiwalay na lang tayo sa isa't isa. 'Di ba? Kaya ba natin? 'Di ba? Anong mangyayari sa atin pag ginawa natin yun? Nandito na tayo
So that recollection of a shared history and the shared set of facts are critical to forging forward, you're saying.
That's true. This is my analogy here. Yung babaylan nung unang panahon, bakit sila mahalaga? Kahit na sabi mong fiction yung sinasabi nila about yung mga malakas at maganda o yung pagkinanta nila yung mga epiko, 'di ba? Pero when they chant the epics, the babaylanes, the people feel that they have one history, isang pinagmulan, isang patutunguhan. And they have more coherence with each other because of that. So yun dapat yung role ng history at ng historians is when we tell our stories, it in many ways binds us. Now, of course, there's some historians who don't believe like me. Pero for me, that's what I want to take as a role. As a historian, na nag-unite, no? Kasi sabi ni Gregoria de Jesus, kapag pinaghahati mo ang bayan, sagabal ka sa kasarinlan. Ayokong maging sagabal sa kasarinlan.
So actually we've reached the yung natin,
wow.
5:32 na at napahaba ang ating maraming salamat po. May last words ka na gusto mong sabihin sa lahat? Sorry, we cannot answer all the questions talaga.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry.
We'll send to.
Oo. Lahat po kayong mga nagtanong, salamat. Lahat po kayo na mga hinahawakan ko po kayo isa-isa ng maraming salamat kahit may social physical distancing tayo. Salamat po. Binabati ko kayo at niyayakap ko kayong lahat. Salamat sa pagsama nyo sa akin. Alam kong napakahalaga ng 1.5 oras ninyo. Pero ito'y binigay nyo sa ating talakayan at salamat sa mga tanong nyo at sana meron din kayong napakinabang. Salamat sa Rappler at sa MOVEPH, Gemma, Vernice, Raisa. Thank you so much sa inyong lahat. Sa lahat ng mga kaguro ko, basta ganito lang, wag nating tatanggapin na ang kasaysayan ay isang minor subject lamang. Ang nakataya dito, pag hindi natin naintindihan ng kasaysayan, buhay natin, kinabukasan ng ating mga anak. Ang kasaysayan, hindi nito masosolve ang lahat ng bagay. Hindi ito ang solusyon. Pero pwedeng maging gabay ang aral ng nakaraan para matuto tayo at gumawa ng mas magandang kinabukasan. At tayo yung mga Pilipino, kayong mga kaguro ko, kayo ang nagbubuklod sa ating mga estudyante na maging proud na maging Pilipino sila. This is not a very easy job. Pero I hope na tingnan nyo yun sa puso ninyo para hindi nyo laging mamaliitin ng sarili nyo na teacher lang ako. Sapagkat tayong mga guro ang nagbubuklod sa bansang ito. At kailangan kunin natin ang papel na yun. Kung hindi, baka mapahamak po ang ating kinabukasan. So, salamat po. Salamat talaga.